The night before the battle smelled of smoke and cedar. General Lycander stood at the edge of the sacred grove, staring at the marble columns of Delphi that gleamed faintly under the torchlight. His men sang and drank by their campfires in the valley below, but here, on the slopes of Parnassus, silence pressed close. The oracle had spoken. Her voice still clung to him like frost. Victory will be yours, but it shall be hollow. To spurn the gods' warning is to invite their gaze, and their gaze will break you. Lycander had stood before her in his crimson cloak, armor gleaming, sword at his hip. He had listened. And then he had laughed. "What does a hollow victory matter?" he had said. "A victory is a victory. I will not let fear make me weak." But now, alone among whispering olive trees, he felt the words clawing at his chest. He tightened his grip on his spear until the knuckles whitened. The gods could watch all they wanted. He was a man of flesh and iron were what won wars. A rustle in the grove broke his thoughts. "General." It was Callista. She emerged from the shadows, robes brushing the ground, her face lit by torchlight. "You went to her," she said softly, stepping closer. "I can see it in your eyes." Lycander turned his face away. "Her riddles are chains meant to bind the will of men. I won't wear them." Callista studied him, lips tightening. "You think you are stronger than the gods? Stronger than Apollo himself? Hubris is a dangerous fire, Lycander." He smiled bitterly. "Hubris wins battles. Fear loses them." Callista drew nearer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "The oracle does not speak to frighten men. She speaks because the gods already see what is to come. Ignore her, and you do not only gamble with your fate, you gamble with all of ours." The general turned fully now, their eyes locking. His voice dropped to a growl. "My men believe in me. They follow my commands, not whispers from caves. If I falter, they falter. If I doubt, they doubt. So yes, I will ignore her. Tomorrow, when the field runs red with Spartan blood, and Athens stands triumphant, you will see who was right." For a long moment, Callista said nothing. Then she whispered, "Or perhaps you will see what victory truly costs." Before Lycander could answer, a horn echoed faintly from the valley below, the signal of a scouting party's return. He strode past her without a word, cloak snapping behind him, leaving her among the olive trees with the torchlight flickering across her troubled face. The morning came with a sky painted in blood-red dawn. The plains of the Ammon spread wide and flat, perfect for the clash of armies. Lycander rode at the head of 10,000 Athenian soldiers, their spears bristling like a forest, shields polished to gleam beneath the sun. Across the plain waited Sparta. Black cloaks, scarlet crests, silent as carved stone. Lycander raised his spear, his voice thundering over the ranks. "Men of Athens, today the world watches. Today we carve our names into eternity. The gods may sit idle in their heavens, but it is we who decide the fate of men." A roar rose from his soldiers, rolling like thunder across the field. The clash came like the meeting of storms. Spears snapped, shields rang, men screamed as bronze split flesh. Lycander fought at the front, his blade flashing, his armor spattered with blood. He carved a path through Spartans like a lion among wolves, his soldiers surging behind him. By dusk, the ground was carpeted in corpses. The Spartans were broken, their survivors fleeing into the mountains. Victory was theirs. But as the cheers rose from his weary men, Lycander felt no triumph. His chest was heavy, his throat dry. The oracle's words pulsed in his skull. "Victory will be yours, but it shall be hollow." And then he saw them. Among the bodies lay not only Spartans, but Athenians, far too many. Whole companies slaughtered, commanders he had trusted cut down in the mud. And beyond them, the camp. Smoke. Flames. The Spartans had circled behind. His own supply lines were ash. His wagons of grain, his reserves of weapons, all gone. The victory he had won on the field left him with an army too blooded and starved to march home. He dropped his sword, staring at the ruin as laughter and celebration spread among his men. They did not yet see. But he did. The gods were watching. And the curse had only begun. The fires smoldered long into the night, painting the horizon with an angry red glow. General Lycander stood apart from his celebrating men, staring at the column of smoke rising from what had been his supply wagons. Every flicker of flame felt like the gods whispering mockery in his ear. Callista found him there, alone, hands clasped behind her back as though she had expected this moment all along. The crackling firelight touched her face, highlighting the worry etched into her eyes. "You see it now," she said quietly. Lycander didn't answer. His fingers flexed at his side, aching to wrap around his sword, as if steel could cut through prophecy. "The men rejoice," she continued, "but they do not understand what you have cost them. No food for the return march. No reserves to stand against raiders. No healing herbs for the wounded." He rounded on her, jaw clenched. "And what would you have had me do? Flee the field? Let Sparta claim the day?" "No," Callista replied, her voice calm, steady. "I would have had you heed the gods' warning." Her certainty struck him harder than any Spartan blade. For a moment he wavered, then forced the doubt from his face. "The gods love to test men with fear. I will not bow to it. We will march back to Athens. They will welcome us as heroes." She looked at him as though she could see the crack spreading through the armor of his pride. Then she shook her head and walked away, her silhouette melting into the firelit haze. At dawn, Lycander gave the order to march. 10,000 men trudged across blackened earth, armor dented, shields heavy, wounds left half-treated. They carried what little grain they salvaged, but it was never enough. The sun burned hot during the day, the night snored with cold. Each morning, fewer men rose to march. Some bled out during the night, others lay too weak to move, eyes glassy with hunger. By the 5th day, discipline began to fracture. Whispers rippled through the ranks of starvation, of cursed omens, of the gods' anger. On the 6th day, a fight broke out between two captains over a scrap of bread. Lycander dragged them apart, his voice booming across the column. "Enough. You are Athenians, not scavenging dogs. We have bled together, fought together, and we will endure together." But he saw the doubt in their eyes. He could feel their faith slipping like sand between his fingers. That night, he stood by the dying campfire when a shadow approached. It was Damon. "They blame you," Damon said softly, keeping his eyes on the flames. Lycander bristled. "They owe me their lives. Without me, the Spartans would have slaughtered us all." "Perhaps," Damon allowed, then met his general's gaze. "But what good is a victory if it leads us to death in the wilderness? A hungry man will follow his stomach before he follows his general." Silence stretched between them. Lycander stared into the fire, watching it devour what little wood remained. Damon leaned closer. "If we are to survive, we must take what we need. There are villages in the foothills. Farmers, herders. They have grain. We have swords." Lycander's jaw tightened. "Our own people. Better they starve than us," Damon said, his voice low, almost pleading. "Athens needs its soldiers alive. What are a few peasants compared to an army?" The general closed his eyes, the oracle's words echoing again. "Victory will be yours, but it shall be hollow." Had the gods already placed this choice before him, knowing what he would do? The next day, he gave the order. They descended upon the villages like wolves. Smoke rose from thatched roofs, grain stores were emptied, livestock seized. Farmers wept as soldiers carried off their children's food, their hands too calloused and broken to resist. Lycander rode at the head, his face a mask of stone. He did not watch the pleading eyes. He did not hear the screams. He kept his gaze fixed on the road, telling himself it was survival, telling himself it was necessary. But at night, as he lay awake with the distant cries still ringing in his ears, he realized something terrible. The hollow victory was consuming him piece by piece. And the gods were not done yet. The army marched heavier after the raids. Their bellies were full, but their spirits were not. The stolen grain quieted hunger, yet suspicion festered like an open wound. Villagers trailed in their wake, mothers wailing, children clinging to burned scraps of cloth, fathers cursing the Athenians with trembling fists. Lycander kept his eyes forward, but each cry pierced deeper than a spear. At first, he told himself it was necessary. Then he told himself it was temporary. But after the 4th village, after the 50th child staring at him with hollow eyes, the excuses grew brittle. It was on the 10th day of their march that the true fracture began. They were crossing the river Alpheus, a shallow stream glinting under the sun. The men waded through, grumbling, water swirling around battered greaves. Suddenly, a commotion broke out on the far bank. Shouts, curses, steel drawn. Lycander rode forward, Damon at his side. He found 2 groups of soldiers squared off, blades bared, faces twisted with rage. In the middle, a sack of grain lay torn open, spilling golden kernels into the mud. "They're stealing from the rations," one captain shouted, pointing at the other. "Lies," the accused snarled. "It was mine, won in battle." The men surged, and steel met steel. "Enough!" Lycander's voice thundered, silencing them for a moment. He rode his horse between the lines, spear leveled. "Put down your weapons, or I will strike the first man who moves." Reluctantly, blades lowered. The general dismounted, picking up a handful of spilled grain. He let it slip slowly through his fingers, the wind catching it, carrying it away. "This," he said, his voice cold, "is what will destroy us. Not Spartans. Not Persians. Not famine. This." He turned to Damon. "Take the guilty. Lash them until their backs bleed." Damon hesitated, then gave a sharp nod. Soldiers dragged the accused men away, their screams soon echoing over the river. The rest of the army watched in silence, fear and resentment churning together. When it was done, Lycander mounted again. His face was hard, but inside, unease gnawed at him. He had meant to restore discipline. Instead, he saw only more doubt in their eyes. That night, as campfires flickered low, Callista came to him once more. "You see it now," she said, her grey eyes catching the firelight. "You tear down your own men to hold them together. You burn the villages of your own kin to feed them. How long before there is nothing left of you?" Lycander stared into the flames. "Do you think I enjoy this? That I take pleasure in watching them suffer? I think the gods gave you a choice," Callista said, her voice quiet but sharp as a blade. "And you keep choosing pride." He turned on her, anger flaring. "Do not speak to me of pride, priestess. Speak of survival. These men need food. They need order. They need me to be strong." Her eyes softened, but her words cut deeper than scorn. "And who will you be, when all that is left is ash and blood?" For once, he had no answer. 3 nights later, the gods gave him another test. It was near midnight when Damon burst into his tent, his face pale beneath the grime. "General, trouble. Come quickly." Lycander seized his sword and followed. Outside, the camp was chaos. A dozen men had deserted, stealing horses and grain. Torches bobbed in the distance, the deserters already a mile away. The soldiers clamored for pursuit. Damon's hand tightened on his axe. "If you let them go, the others will follow. Discipline will crumble. You must make an example." Lycander's chest heaved. He saw their faces, the deserters were not cowards. They were starving men, tired men, men who wanted only to live. To hunt them was to spill more of his own blood on already cursed soil. Yet Damon's voice was hard. "If they escape, you lose everything. The army will dissolve before it reaches Athens. You must order their deaths." The oracle's words surged back into him, icy and merciless. "Victory will be yours, but it shall be hollow." He lifted his sword, pointing toward the distant torches. His voice was heavy, final. "Ride them down." The riders thundered into the night. By dawn, they returned blooded but victorious, dragging bodies behind their horses. The deserters' corpses lay in the mud, faces twisted in terror, throats cut open. The soldiers watched in silence, no cheers, no relief. Only fear. And Lycander realized with cold clarity, the gods had been right. He had won the battle. But with every step since, he was losing his soul. The days stretched into weeks, each one heavier than the last. The army limped toward Athens like a wounded beast, carrying scars not only of battle but of hunger, betrayal, and doubt. Where once they had sung marching songs, now silence reigned. Where once shields had gleamed in the sun, now they dragged dull and battered at their sides. And where once Lycander's name had been shouted with pride, now it passed in whispers, whispers that curdled into curses when they thought he could not hear. One night, as the moon silvered the tents, Damon came again. His eyes were bloodshot, his voice low but urgent. "They're speaking of mutiny." Lycander looked up sharply from the map he had been staring at for hours without seeing. "Who?" "Too many to name," Damon admitted, running a hand over his scarred cheek. "The lashes, the deserters, the villages, they think you've angered the gods. Some say you've been cursed." Lycander slammed his fist onto the map table, rattling the bronze cup beside it. "Cursed? I saved them from Sparta. Without me, their bones would already be feeding the crows." Damon's gaze was steady, sorrowful. "You and I know that. But men don't follow logic. They follow faith. And their faith is crumbling." A silence stretched. The fire crackled, shadows swaying across the tent walls. Finally, Lycander asked, almost a whisper, "And you, Damon? Do you doubt me too?" His friend's jaw tightened. "I swore my life to you, Lycander. But I fear the gods' hand more than Spartan steel. I fear they mean to make an example of you." Lycander turned away, his chest tight, his mind caught in a vice. Every path before him led into darkness. The next morning, the gods struck again. They found the first body at dawn, a soldier slumped against a rock, throat slit clean, his blood blackened in the dirt. His shield was gone. By noon, 2 more were found, their heads mounted on spears outside the camp. Panic rippled through the ranks. Rumors spread like wildfire, Spartan raiders hunting them, vengeful villagers trailing them, spirits of the dead exacting their toll. Lycander called a council of his captains. They gathered in the flickering gloom of the command tent, voices sharp, fists pounding. "We must move faster," one insisted. "No, we must fortify, defend ourselves until help comes," another countered. "They're being picked off like sheep," Damon growled. "If we don't root out who's behind it, there will be nothing left to march home." The argument swelled until Lycander rose to his feet. His voice cut through the clamor like a blade. "Enough. We are not sheep. We are Athenians. Whoever dares strike us will pay in blood." But even as he spoke, he felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing down, cold and merciless. The oracle's warning throbbed in his skull. That night, unable to sleep, he walked the perimeter of the camp. Torches guttered in the wind, soldiers huddled under thin blankets. Every face he passed turned away. At the edge of the camp, he found Callista. She was kneeling in the dirt, tracing symbols into the earth with her fingers, murmuring prayers to Apollo. The firelight carved her features into something almost otherworldly. "You think your god listens?" Lycander asked, his voice hoarse. She looked up at him, her grey eyes glimmering. "The gods always listen. It is men who refuse to hear." Lycander stepped closer, his fists clenching. "Tell me, then. What is it they want from me? I have fought, I have bled, I have carried their curse like a chain around my neck. What more must I give?" Her gaze did not falter. "They want you to understand." "Understand what?" he demanded. "That some victories are meant to be lost," she whispered. The words struck him harder than any spear. He turned away, unable to face her, staring instead into the endless dark beyond the campfires. And in that darkness, he thought he saw movement, a shadow too tall, too broad, gliding between the trees. Watching. Waiting. The hair on his neck rose. The gods were not done with him yet. The first scream tore through the night like a blade. Lycander was on his feet before his mind caught up, sword drawn, heart pounding. Around him the camp erupted, men scrambling for shields, torches flaring, captains shouting. He pushed through the chaos, Damon at his side, until they reached the source. A soldier lay sprawled in the dirt, his chest ripped open, blood soaking the ground. His eyes were wide, lips frozen mid-cry. But there was no enemy nearby. No Spartans. No raiders. Only the whispering pines at the edge of the camp, swaying in the midnight wind. "It wasn't steel," Damon muttered, kneeling beside the corpse. His scarred fingers brushed the torn flesh. Something clawed him. "Wolves," a captain offered, though his voice trembled. No wolf leaves wounds like these, Damon said grimly. The men murmured, fear rippling through their ranks. They shifted their weight, eyes darting toward the dark forest. Every shadow seemed alive, every crack of a branch a threat. Back to your post, Lycander roared. Torches lit, shields up. But though they obeyed, their fear clung to the air like smoke. By dawn, 3 more were dead. Each body was found at the very edge of the camp, as though dragged by unseen hands. None had cried out. None had raised a weapon. The soldiers gathered in uneasy silence, faces pale, eyes hollow. Lycander stood before them, his crimson cloak heavy with dew, his armor dark with blood that was not his own. These are tricks, he declared, though his voice carried more anger than conviction. The Spartans stalk us, trying to break our will. They cannot face us in battle, so they strike like cowards in the night. But we will not falter. The men gave no roar of agreement. Only a few nodded. Most stared at the ground, or worse at him, their eyes filled with accusation. That night, Callista came to him again. He had half a mind to send her away, but her presence seemed inevitable, as though the gods themselves kept placing her in his path. You know this is not Spartans, she said quietly, her face pale in the firelight. You feel it. The gods have loosed something upon you. Lycander glared at her, his hands curling into fists. You think this is Apollo's doing? That he sets monsters on my men? Her gaze did not waver. The gods do not need to send monsters, Lycander. They make men into monsters well enough. Fear does the work for them. Her words coiled in his mind, insidious. He wanted to deny them, but part of him already believed. Each death, each whisper, each sidelong glance from his soldiers, their fear was not just of shadows. It was of him. On the 13th night, the curse bared its teeth. A sentry vanished. No sound, no struggle, only his spear left leaning against a tree. When they found him at dawn, his body was hung from the branches, gutted, his entrails trailing like streamers in the wind. The army broke. Men wailed, some dropped their weapons, others fled screaming into the forest. Captains shouted, Damon struck men with the flat of his blade, but panic spread like wildfire. Lycander mounted his horse, his voice thundering over the chaos. Hold the line. You think to flee from shadows? Stand with me, or you are already dead. For a heartbeat, some steadied. But then another scream ripped through the camp, and a soldier stumbled into the firelight, his face pale, eyes rolling, throat torn open. The army splintered. Groups scattered in all directions, shields abandoned, discipline shattered. Damon fought his way to Lycander's side, his face twisted with rage and fear. They're finished. The gods have them by the throat. We cannot hold them together. Lycander's chest heaved. His men, his victory, his army disintegrating before his eyes. The gods had taken what Sparta could not. And in that moment, as the campfires sputtered in the wind, he felt it, a presence in the darkness. Watching. Waiting. The weight of divine eyes pressing down on him, as heavy as iron. The oracle's voice echoed once more in his skull, cruel and inexorable. Victory will be yours, but it shall be hollow. And Lycander finally understood this was not the end of the curse. It was only its beginning. The battlefield was not of men and spears, but of shadows and silence. Lycander stood amidst the ruins of his camp, abandoned shields, smoldering fires, torn tents flapping in the cold wind. The army that had marched with him in glory was gone, scattered like frightened birds. Some fled into the hills, others vanished into the forest, their fates swallowed by the dark. Only a handful remained, men too stubborn or too terrified to leave. Damon was among them, his scarred face grim, his sword dripping with another man's blood, not Spartan blood, but the blood of a deserter he had cut down in fury. This is no army, Damon spat, kicking the corpse aside. This is carrion. The gods have broken them. They will come back, Lycander said, though his voice cracked with doubt. He scanned the empty woods, listening for the clash of steel or the war cry of Spartans. Nothing. Only the hollow whisper of the wind. Damon rounded on him, eyes blazing. No, they won't. And you know it. The men blame you, Lycander. They whisper that you brought this curse upon them. That your pride drew the gods' wrath. They'll not return to your banner. Not ever. The words struck like hammer blows, but Lycander did not flinch. He forced himself to meet Damon's stare, though deep inside, the accusation had already taken root. At dusk, Callista came again. She moved through the camp like a wraith, untouched by fear, her white robes billowing in the smoke. "You see now, don't you?" she murmured. "This is no battle of spears. You have angered Apollo, and he has set his curse upon you." Lycander seized her by the arm, his grip iron. "If the gods truly curse me, then tell me how to break it. Speak, oracle, or I will have your tongue cut from your head." But she only gazed at him with sorrow, not fear. "You cannot break it, General. You can only endure it." His hand trembled, rage and despair warring within him. At last he released her, shoving her aside. She stumbled but did not fall. "Endure," he hissed. "I do not endure. I conquer." "Not this," she whispered, her eyes glistening. "This is not a foe you can strike down." That night, the last of his loyal captains fled. Lycander awoke to silence, the campfires cold, only Damon sitting watch with his sword across his knees. The rest were gone, no struggle, no farewell, only abandonment. "They left before dawn," Damon said, his voice like gravel. "Even the bravest have no stomach for this curse." Lycander stared into the dying embers, his chest hollow. Once, he had commanded legions, his name feared from Athens to Thebes. Now, he sat in the ashes of his own ambition, deserted, mocked by the gods. "What am I without them?" he whispered. Damon's jaw tightened. "Still a general. Still my brother in arms." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Lycander shook his head. "A general with no soldiers is no general at all." As the sun rose, a Spartan war horn echoed from the hills. Lycander and Damon climbed to a ridge and saw them, an army of crimson cloaks, marching in tight formation, their bronze shields gleaming. They had come not for battle, but for slaughter. "They smell weakness," Damon growled. "They will sweep what remains of us aside." Lycander's throat tightened. His few men could not withstand even the first charge. To stand and fight was to die. To run was to live in shame. And in that moment, he remembered Callista's words, "You cannot break it. You can only endure it." Perhaps this was the curse, that no matter what choice he made, it would end in ruin. He looked at Damon, the only loyal soul who remained. "Will you die with me, old friend?" Damon's lips twisted into a grim smile. "I've no taste for growing old, anyway." The Spartan horns grew louder, their drums beating like the hearts of gods. Lycander drew his sword, its edge catching the dawn. His chest swelled with defiance, though his heart knew despair. If the gods had cursed him, then he would curse them back, with blood, with steel, with the defiance of a man who refused to kneel. As the Spartans descended, Lycander raised his blade to the heavens. "If I am damned, then let all Olympus see me fall." And with Damon at his side, he charged into the oncoming tide. The clash came like a thunderstorm. Bronze met iron, shield slammed against shield, and the Spartan phalanx crashed into the ragged line of Lycander's last followers. The ground shook with the weight of disciplined warriors, their spears bristling like a forest of death. Lycander's sword cleaved through the first, his roar cutting through the din. Damon fought at his side, a whirlwind of steel, hacking and bellowing like a beast unleashed. For a brief, blazing moment, it was as though they were gods themselves, two men holding back an ocean. But the tide was endless. Men screamed and fell. The thin line buckled. Blood sprayed the air, hot and metallic. Damon took a spear in the thigh but fought on, dragging his attacker down and splitting his skull with a savage blow. Lycander's arms ached, his breath came ragged, but his fury burned hotter with every strike. "If this is to be the end," he thought, "then let it be written in crimson." Through the chaos, he glimpsed a figure on the ridge, a woman in white, her hair whipping in the wind. Callista. The oracle stood watching, as still as a marble statue, her gaze fixed upon him. Their eyes met, and though she was far, her lips moved. He could not hear the words, yet he knew them. "This was always your fate." A Spartan spear struck his side, piercing the bronze plates of his armor. He staggered, snarling, and tore it free, cutting down his assailant even as his own blood poured hot into the dust. Damon caught his arm, dragging him upright. "Stand, brother, stand." But Damon's own strength faltered. A Spartan sword cut him down from behind, the blade bursting through his chest. He gasped, blood bubbling at his lips, before collapsing at Lycander's feet. For the first time, Lycander's roar cracked into something human, a sound of grief, raw and unmasked. He stood over his friend's body, hacking with wild abandon, each stroke a curse hurled at heaven itself. The Spartans fell back, forming a circle around him. He was the last. Alone, bleeding, surrounded. Lycander planted his feet in the blood-soaked earth, sword in hand, and lifted his face to the sky. "You gods above," he shouted hoarsely, his voice breaking, "is this your justice? You take my army, my honor, my brothers. You curse me with hollow victory, only to mock me with this end." The Spartans tightened the ring, their shields gleaming, their spears raised. Yet none struck. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to still, the men, the sky, the very air waiting. And then it happened. The sun darkened. A shadow passed over the battlefield, swallowing dawn in twilight. The wind howled through the valley, carrying with it a voice that was not mortal, low, resonant, echoing from everywhere and nowhere. "You defied the word of the oracle. You defied Apollo's will. Victory was given, but you scorned it. Now, Oathbreaker, know the price of pride." The Spartans stepped back, their faces stricken with awe. Their spears lowered, not in triumph but in fear. Lycander, gasping, dropped to one knee. His sword slipped from his hand, clattering against stone. Blood streamed from his wounds, but it was not his flesh that failed him, it was his spirit, crushed beneath the weight of divine judgment. Above, the clouds split, and a shaft of golden light pierced him. Not warm, not merciful. Burning. Seething. The light flayed him, searing his soul. He screamed, his voice echoing across the hills. The curse was not death. Death would have been mercy. The curse was to live alone, dishonored, bereft of army, bereft of friend, bereft of victory. And as the light faded, Lycander remained, kneeling in the dust, broken yet breathing. The Spartans, shaken, lowered their weapons. None dared touch him. None dared strike. To kill him would be to challenge the gods' decree. So they left him. Lycander, once the Lion of Thebes, once a general who could make mountains tremble, knelt alone in the valley. His army gone, his name tarnished, his soul shackled by the curse of Apollo. And from the ridge, the oracle turned and walked away, her voice carrying on the wind. "The curse is not your death, Lycander. It is your life."